Hello and welcome to this tutorial on how to use the building placement package from the asset store to actually place buildings RTS style. Now, first things first, this package was created with Unity 5, so it's recommended that you use Unity 5 when using this package. I'm sure you can downgrade it somehow, that I've not tested it, so I can only guarantee that it's going to work with Unity 5. The other thing that you will need for this package to work is NGUI. You need to have NGUI because it only works with it so far. There's no version that works with the built-in Unity UI. So first, let's just add the package. I'm just gonna import it from my local hard drive. You can import it from the asset store, and while it's imported, I'm gonna tell you how this tutorial will be held. It's split in three parts. The first part will be on how to generally set up NGUI buttons so that you can use it for building placement. In the second part, we will be looking at how to create proper prefabs to use them with the package, and in the third part I will give you some additional information on how to customize the package and the script to fit your exact needs. Now, we see that it has already imported, and first we need to see if everything's working, and for this we're going to open up the root folder. This is dogmatic building placement, and here we have a folder called demo. Going to open up that, and here's a scene called demo. We're just going to double click that, and our demo scene should open up now, and if everything's okay, we should already run it right out of the box and it should work. So now I'm going to try and tap that, drag the building and release here, so everything works just fine. So everything's set up correctly. We don't need to do anything further here, so we can stop that for now and create our own scene. I'm going to have a new scene here, and what we first need is a substrate, meaning an object that you can place your buildings on. It can be a terrain, it can be a flat plane, that's entirely up to you depending on what you want to do. The only thing important is, if we go to the scene view, I have my terrain imported, created right here. The only important thing that your substrate must have is a collider component. Now, this terrain has a terrain collider. If I want to place my buildings on flat ground only, I can also use a plane and place that on the plane. The only thing important again is that it needs to have a collider component on it. Now, I'm not going to model an entirely new terrain, so this is why I'm going to delete those two objects for now. I'm going to use a pre-created terrain that I've created earlier for the demo. That's because the terrain's already textured and has a couple of attributes that will be useful in order to see all the features of the placement package. Because it has flat ground, it has hills, and it has cliffs. So this allows us to have a look at all the features that come with the placement package. Now, first, let's adjust the camera to get an RTS-like view. I'm gonna put it a bit higher, and I'm gonna have it face down 55 degrees, and let's move it on top of the terrain. And I always like to rotate it, but you don't have to, but I like to do that. And I think this is a good area. Now we have a flat terrain, we have some hills, and we have a cliff, and I think that's a good terrain to work with now. Now what we need to do is add an NGUI button. Now I hope you're familiar with NGUI, because I cannot go into how to use NGUI. I'm just going to have to assume that you already know how it works. So I am just going to create a panel. That's actually not right. I want to create an entirely new panel. Just going to create a simple 2D panel and add the UI root to the main camera. And I'm going to set the anchor to top right. And now I can create a button, my first button. Now, for the atlas, I see it already has the example atlas of NGUI installed. If you have NGUI, you can just use the example atlas is provided in there. I'm just going to use the wooden atlas and the Arimo 20 font, and with that I'm going to create a new button. I'm going to add it to the panel, and I'm going to position it to be where I want it to be. And one thing I realized is, let's just make this directional light a tiny bit brighter. That's more beautiful. And now we have our button. In order to place buildings with it, we need to add a script to it. Now, when you go to the root folder of the building placement package, there is a subfolder called scripts. We can go in there, and there you have two scripts, one called dogmatic building placer ngui and dogmatic building placer ngui mobile. I'm going to explain later what the difference between those two is. For now, let's just work with the mobile version, and I'm just going to take that script, drag it up and drop it on the button, right on the button. And if we click the button in the hierarchy, we can see in the inspector now that the script is here, and it asks us for some parameters. Now, I'm going to go through those parameters. I'm not going to go into how to create the prefabs for those parameters. We will cover that in the second part of this tutorial. For now, let's just see what it asks us for. It asks us for a building. That's the actual building prefab, and I have a folder called prefabs in the building placement package. If you go to the root folder, there's a folder called prefabs. Just go in there and you have a lot of ready-made prefabs that you can already use, and I'm going to go through what they mean and what they do. So this is a barracks prefab. This is actually just the prefab of a barracks. It looks like this. I'm going to delete that. I'm going to go to my button. I'm just going to drag the barracks and drop it into the building placeholder. The next thing we need is a placement highlighter. The placement highlighter is pretty much only a plane that highlights if a building is placeable at the current position or not by changing its color from green to red and vice versa. So in the prefabs folder, we have a prefab called placement highlighter. I'm just going to take that and drag it up here and drop it in the placement highlighter placeholder. The third thing, highlighter altitude, we don't need this for now. We'll leave this at 0. For the construction site, this is something that you might or might not need, depending on what type of game you're planning to do. But usually in a lot of games, when you place a building, it won't appear instantly. Instead, it will a construction site is going to appear first, and it's going to stay there until the building's ready, and only then the building will appear. So whatever object is inside this construction site is what in the end is going to be placed on the terrain. So I have a construction site for the barracks here in the prefabs folder called barracks construction. I'm just going to drag that in and place it on the construction site placeholder. The next grid increment, we're going to skip that for now. Grid offset 2 and the maximum gradient angle 2 and the placement transparency, I'm going to explain that later. But the placement layer is something that we have to take care of now. The placement layer, you have to select the placement layer. This is the layer of the object that you are planning to place buildings on. So in this case, it's the layer of our terrain. Now let's have a look on what layer our terrain is. It's on default. So in the script, we would have to select the default layer. Now I'm not going to select the default layer because it's recommended that you do not use the default layer for such things, because by definition all new objects that you create or prefabs are on the default layer, and that might cause quite a bit of confusion and interference. So for that, we're going to create a custom layer that we're going to use for our terrain. So we're going to go to the terrain, add layer, and we're going to add a terrain layer. That's it. Now we can go to the button, and in the placement layer, we're going to select terrain. And if everything's correct, then it should already work. So I'm gonna tap that button. No, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. I'm sorry, because I have forgot something. terrain. Yeah, exactly. The terrain is still on default. I haven't changed the layer of the terrain. So we go to terrain, click on layer, click on terrain, and now it should work. So we're going to launch the scene in game view. I'm going to tap the button, and we see that I have my building here, and I can move it around. And when I release it, it's going to be placed. So you see that when I release it, the construction site is being placed and not the actual building. And only when the time is up, so when the building is ready, the construction site disappears and it's replaced by the actual building. Now let's go through some of the other parameters that we have here. One being the highlighter altitude. Now you can see that when I tap this button, the highlighter is red if I cannot place it at a specific position, and turns green if I am in a position where I can place it. If I'm on a red position and or invalid position and release it, it's just going to disappear. The highlighter altitude is at 0 by default, because the placement highlighter usually is always on the ground. But there are some exceptions where you want to increase the altitude of your highlighter, because some game developers develop prefabs or buildings that have a ground plate, and if that ground plate has the exact same size of the placement highlighter, then it will cover it entirely and it won't be visible anymore. So in that case, you could just say placement highlighter is at 0.1, and if you then place a building, the highlighter is like hanging in the air. So you can, but for now we'll leave this at 0 because 0 is fine. We don't have a ground plate. The next thing is, you might have realized that we can move the building freely all over the place. If we use a grid increment, that is, if we want to use a grid, we have to set a grid increment. The grid increment is like the smallest piece of a grid. It's like the single square of that grid. The higher this number goes, the lower the resolution of that grid is going to be. I'm just going to try this number, and now if I want to place a building, we can see that it moves along a grid and is not floating in the air anymore. Instead, it's moving on that grid. The next thing we want to look at is grid offset. No, we'll look at that when we create new prefabs. The next thing we want to have a look at is the maximum gradient angle. Now you see that I cannot place building anywhere on this hill. I can only place it here where the terrain is flat. That's because my maximum gradient angle is 0, so whenever I have a hill, it will tell me that I cannot place the building at that position. So if I increase that maximum gradient angle to, say, 20 degrees, now I can place the building on the hill if the gradient angle is below 20 degrees. So I can place it on a hill, but I will not be able to place it on this cliff here, because obviously the gradient angle is more than 20 degrees here. But I can place it up here if I like to. We'll just release it. And the last parameter that we're going to have a look at is the placement transparency. The placement transparency tells us if the building and the placement highlighter should appear transparent while placing. Not after placement they will be solid, but while placing they might be transparent. And if you tick that, you will see that the placement highlighter is transparent now. It's still changes colors, but you can see through it. And the building is solid. Usually the building would be shown as transparent as well, but it works only if an object uses a transparent shader. In this case, the placement highlighter is using a transparent shader. The building, however, does not. So yeah, you can use a transparent shader, but be warned that the built-in Unity transparent shaders are good for simple meshes, but for more complex meshes like this building, they won't work very well. So yeah, I'm not using it here. But yeah, that's pretty much all on how to set up a button for building placement. We're now going to have a look on how to create your own custom prefabs to create your own buildings, to use your own meshes and so on. So let's get into that. There's a couple of things, a couple of requirements that your prefabs have to meet. We're going to just have a look at this barracks prefab that I used previously. Every prefab has to have a box collider, and or a collider object in general, but box collider is generally recommended. And the option is trigger has to be ticked. It also has to have a rigid body component on them, with use gravity unticked and is kinematic ticked. And it needs to have the dogmatic obstacle detector script attached to it. Now, in order for you to not have to build all these prefabs from the scratch, I'm going to delete that. There's a folder in the prefab folder. There's a folder called prefab presets, and there's a set of presets in here that you can use to create buildings in certain sizes. Now, in the next step, we're going to create a house, and for that, first what we need to do is let me put it this way. This house is supposed to be 3 by 3 if placed on a grid. Now, 3 by 3 if placed on a grid means how big is my grid, or how big is my grid increment. And to find that out, I always go like this. I ask myself, how big do I want my grid increment to be? And to find out, I just add a 3D cube somewhere. And I know that the size of this cube is 1. Now this would then be, if I set the grid increment to be 1, then that would be 1 grid increment. Now this is a tiny bit too large for me. I'm just going to try out how 0.75 works, and that's a bit smaller, but I think that's a good grid increment, so I'm just going to use now. So just going to use that. So 3 by 3 building would be 3 grid increments in each direction. So that would be that. So now I know what grid increment I want to use. I'm just going to delete my cube and go back to my button and change the grid increment to 0.75. And now I'm going to create my prefab using a preset. I'm just going to drag a 3 by 3 preset here, because I want to make a 3 by 3 house, and just going to drag that to the scene. And next thing I want to do is I want to go to my models folder. You can use your own models, or you can use the ones provided in this package. It really doesn't make a difference, but for further use you will probably want to use your own models. So you grab your model that you want to use. In this case I'm going to use this house. Drag it up here and drop it right on the preset that you've just created in the scene. And I see now mine doesn't have a texture. I'm going to add the text, the proper texture to it. And what we realize is that we have this grid plane that shows us how big the building is supposed to be, and we see that it's much larger. So we're just going to go down and scale it down until it fits completely on the grid plane. And once we have that, we can move it around to be sort of like centered, and we're going to move it down to stand on the grid plane as if it was the ground. Now you can see that my buildings have like some sort of fundament beneath the ground. That might be useful in case you place your buildings on hills, because otherwise parts of them would be hanging in the air if you don't place them on flat ground. That's why it's always a good idea to have something beneath the ground that the building can stay on, in case you plan to place them on hills. Now the building is there, and what we need to do now is change the tag and the layer. The tag, all buildings must use a common tag, a mutual tag actually, to detect collisions. so to detect whether you're trying to place a building on another building and to disallow you to do that. So in order to do that, you select a tag, and it's always good to have a custom tag, so we will create a custom tag, and we're going to call it obstacle. Just add that, and I'm going to select the tag obstacle, and in the next step in the dogmatic obstacle detector script, we're going to type that tag inside there, so it's obstacle. The layer can be pretty much anything, but it must not be the same layer that your terrain or your substrate is on. So for that, we're going to create a custom layer, and we're going to call it building, which is I think a good layer, and we're going to select that building layer, and we're going to select yes, change children, and now our prefab is on the building layer. Now, last thing we want to do is we want to change the scale. Now, scaling, the scale of your object must always be a integer multitude of your grid increment. Okay, so this is a 3x3 building, and we know that our grid increment was, I don't know how much it was, let me just have a look at the button, it was 0.75. So a 3x3 would be 3 times 0.75 in each direction, so I think this is 2.25, and we're going to have that in all 3 directions, since it's it has a squared base area. And yeah, I think now it's ready, so we can go now and delete the grid plane from the object, because we don't need it anymore, and we're going to rename our preset to the name of our actual prefab. I'm just going to call it my house for now, and now I can go to the folder where I want to have it and just drag it down there, and now I have my newly created prefab. I can delete it from the scene now, and if I go back to the game view and to this button, I can just duplicate that button, and if I go down to the placer script, I can just drag my house to the building placeholder, and since I don't have a construction site for this building, I'm just going to drag my house to the construction site as well, and now I can, if I let me just drag this button down so we can use it. So this one's the house button. Let me just quickly change the label so we know this is the house, and this upper one is the barracks. And if we start the if we test the scene now, we can see that I can place the house. Now you see placement transparency is off, so the placement highlighter is solid. I always like to have placement transparency on, and the same goes for the barracks, placement transparency on, and we want to also have 20 degrees as maximum gradient angle, which is also good. And yeah, now we can place barracks and we can place the house. Now you realize that when I place the house, since it doesn't have a construction site, the house is going to be placed instantly, so no construction site here. Next up, because we don't have a construction site, we want to build one, and yeah, since I've changed these parameters while in play mode, it didn't save them. Okay, now it should work fine. So next we're gonna create a construction site for my house, and to do that I'm gonna do it the same way as I did with my house. I'm gonna go to the prefabs folder, prefab presets. Actually I'm gonna drag the same preset into the scene that I had before, because the construction site needs to be the same size as the actual building. And now if you have a model for the construction site, you can use that. I'm just going to use the house construction model that I have created before, just drop it on the preset, and we see it's too large again, but first let me just add the textures to it so it's not all white. Nah, where is it? There it is. Okay, and now I can go ahead and scale down the construction site to fit entirely on this grid plane. And once it does, I can, like move it around to sit on the plane, and it seems it does in all directions. Yes, it's good. Realize it's flipped around, so we have to rotate it by 180 degrees. We have it here, and then reposition it to fit on the grid plane, and move it a bit down so that it stands perfectly on the ground as it does now. And now we go to our preset to the parent object and select the correct tag again. It was obstacle, and the correct layer, which was building, just as before. We're going to change the children and type the tag down here into the obstacle detector script. And of course we also have to change the scale. It has to have the exact same scale as the building we've created previously, which was 2.25 and 2.25 and 2.25 in all three directions. Now we're almost done. But since this is a construction site, we need one additional component, because the construction site's not going to stay on the terrain forever. It's only going to stay for a while until the building is ready. Then it's going to disappear. And for that, we need to go to the scripts folder. And there we have a script called dogmatic construction site. We're just going to take that and drop it on our prefab. And now you see that it's asking us for two additional parameters, one being the construction time in seconds. I'm going to use 5 seconds for now, and the other one is the actual building that we want to place once the construction time is up. So for that, I'm going to use my newly created house and just drop that in here. And now I think we should be ready, so I can go and delete the grid plane, and I can go to my root folder and just drag that down here. So I create a prefab. Now I can delete it from the scene, and if I go to my house button, which was this, I can just go to the construction site where it holds my house. So I can just go there and oh, I just realized that I didn't rename my prefab. I will rename it to my house construction. Okay, and now I can just go to my house button and just drag that construction site to construction site. And now everything should be set up correctly. We should be able to place the house, and when we release it, the construction site appears, and after 5 seconds the building appears. Now, one thing you might notice is that the barracks construction site is animated while the house construction site is not animated. That is because I have not added an animation controller to the construction site. I've created all the construction sites with animations when I created them. You don't have to, but you can. And certainly if you want to use them, you need to add them to your models. Here we see that the house construction model lacks an animated controller. And if we go to the miscellaneous folder here, we have a folder called animations, and there we have a house construction, which is for this house construction model, and we can just drop that on our model. I'm just going to go there and go to my house construction and drag that on the scene, and go to the house construction model, and now I can go to the animations folder and drag the house construction animated controller right inside here, and now I can apply the prefab, and yeah, now I should be able to delete it from the scene. And if we go to the game view now and start it, the construction site for the house should also be animated as it is. Great. Now let's just make a third prefab. I'm gonna make the tower prefabs just so you guys can see again how quick and easy it works once you get the hang of it. So I'm gonna go to my prefab presets and switch to scene view, and I'm gonna first I'm gonna think how big do I want this tower to be, and I think I want it to be a 2x2 sized building, so I'm gonna take my 2x2 preset, and I'm gonna go to models and add the tower model, drop it right on the preset. Since I don't have materials on them, I have to add the material. Now I'm gonna go and scale it down to fit entirely on the grid plane and move it to stand on it. Great. Now again I go to the parent object, I change the tag to obstacle, change the layer to building, and yes, the children too, and I'm going to type in the obstacle tag in the obstacle detector component. The size is 2x2, so 2 times 0.75 is 1.5 in all three directions since it's square shaped. Base area, and I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, so now I can delete my grid plane, can rename that to my tower, and I can just drag that down here, and I have created my tower prefab. Now the same goes for the construction site. I'm gonna go to the prefab presets, drag the 2x2 preset in here, and go to my models and drag the tower construction that I've previously created and drop it onto that preset. Again, I need to add some materials, which is the tower texture. This consists of a few more parts, so I have to add the materials to every single one of them, which might take a couple of seconds. So now that I've done that, I can scale it down to fit on the grid plane and move it down to stand on the ground. Okay, and again select the opposite. No, that's wrong. Always select the parent object when you change the tag, and change the tag to obstacle, change the layer to building, and yes, change children. Type in the obstacle tag in here. And since this is a construction site and not a building, we're going to go to scripts and add the construction site script to that preset. And here we're going to define a construction time, just going to use 5 seconds again. And we're going to add our actual tower, my tower that I've previously created, to the building placeholder. And change, one thing we have forgotten is to change the size to the same size as our tower, which is 1.5 in each direction. And now we can go and delete that grid plane and rename our preset to my tower construction. And now we can drag that down, and we have our construction prefab for the tower. Now, one thing I forgot here again is that I didn't use the animation controller. I mean, you don't have to if you don't have animations, but for this one I will use it. I'm going to take the tower construction animation controller and drop it right here and click apply. And now I can delete that prefab. And when I go back to my game view, I'm just gonna duplicate this button again and move it down. This is gonna be our tower button, so I'm just gonna change the label to tower. And I'm just gonna go back to this place a script and just use the prefabs that I've just created. I'm going to use my tower as building. Placement highlighter is great as it is. Highlighter attitude as well. I'm going to use my tower construction. Grid increment can stay as it is. Grid offset can stay as it is. Grid offset can stay as it is. Placement layer, terrain, everything's fine. So now we can go ahead, and if we did everything right, we should be able to place the tower. And indeed we are. And we can place the house, and we can place the barracks. So now we can place all three buildings. Now, one thing that I totally forgot, but is very important, is we haven't talked about the grid offset yet, which is very important because there's one thing that you must realize, that when you place a building, the pivot point of the placement always at the center of your prefab. So this might cause a problem if you have differently sized buildings. If you have a close look at the barracks, if I place a barracks here and then try to place a house, you will realize that I am, for some reason, oh yeah, that's you realize that I can place the house on the barracks, and that is because the barracks uses a different tag than the house. We can quickly fix that by going to our button, to the barracks, and change the tag of our barracks from finished to obstacle, and type in obstacle in here. The same for the barracks construction. Obstacle. Now it should work fine. Now, one thing you realize is that when I place a barracks and I try to place a house right next to the barracks, is that for some reason I can't make it fit seamlessly. So it's always a little bit overlapping, or there's a little offset. That is because of the size of the house. The size of the house in grid increments is 3 by 3, as specified earlier. Now this is important because if it's 3 by 3, whenever the size in one direction in grid increments is an odd number, you have to tick the grid offset option. So if it's 3 by 3, it's 3 in both directions, X and Z, I have to tick both these options. If it's 4 by 3, I would tick only the Z axis, because on the Z-axis we have 3 grid increments, and on the X-axis we have 4th, so then it would be like this. And if you have a 4 by 4 building or a 2 by 2 building, then of course you don't have to tick either of them. Now in the case of the house, it's 3 by 3 grid increments, so both are odd numbers, so I have to tick grid offset in both directions. And if you look now, I can place it right next to the barracks, and even right next to the tower. And if you have a look at the houses now, I can place them exactly right next to each other, and they will always fit perfectly. Now that is it for prefab creation. I hope I covered everything that needed to be covered. Now for the last part of this tutorial, we will have a closer look at I'll give you some additional information. Now, first thing you might want to know is that this package works with an orthographic camera just as well as it does with a perspective one. We're just going to switch that to orthographic and change the angle a bit. And if we test it now, we can see that we can place the buildings that we created just as easily as we did in the perspective view. So both work fine. So we're going to go back to our perspective view, and last thing we want to have a look at now is placeholders in the script. If you go to the scripts folder and you open up the dogmatic placer ngui mobile, I'm just going to open that up in MonoDevelop so we can have a look at it. This might take a couple of seconds. Come on. Okay. Here we have the script, and it's fully customizable, so you can customize it any way you want. The script has 3 placeholders in which you can add custom actions and conditions. Now let me quickly explain to you what that means. There's this first placeholder here, about at line 114, where it says add custom actions for valid placement here. It means that once the building is placed down, you can add additional actions that are to be performed. Say you have a system that manages the resources of the player. Say the player has a fixed amount of gold, then in this space here you could add an action that says that subtracts actually the cost of the building from the amount of gold the player has, for instance. So that you can write that in here. The second placeholder is for actions for invalid placement. So whenever a player tries to place a building and it's not possible for whatever reason, then whatever you write in here, whatever action you write down in here, will be called then. So you can in this location have like a message popping up to the player saying that you can't place a building here for whatever reason. So you're really not limited to what you can do. You can do pretty much any action you like. The third placeholder is a bit further down here at 153, sorry. And here it says add custom placement conditions here. Now this placeholder is in the method that is called isLegalPosition. And isLegalPosition is a method that defines whether a building can be placed at the current position or not. Whenever this method returns true, it means that you can place the building where it is at the moment. But if it returns false, you cannot. And you can add a lot of conditions for whether the building is placeable at that point or not. For instance, you could add a condition for whether a player has enough gold to build this building, and you always add this condition in form of an if statement. In this case, you would say something like if, and then you can define your condition here and says player doesn't have enough money or gold, whatever. Then simply return false. And that's the way you add custom conditions to it. You can add as many conditions as you like, but this package is designed to try to limit you as little as possible. So you can add pretty much anything you like to the script. Yeah, that's pretty much it for the how to customize the script. Last but not least, just a couple of quick informations. Everything that you've learned in this tutorial is also in the root folder in the manual. In the root folder you'll find a PDF manual with detailed description on how the package works. And what do I do here? Oh yeah. And if you have any further questions, you can just leave a comment or leave some feedback or send me a message. Now, this package is not limiting you to placing buildings. It's designed specifically to place buildings, but you're not limited to that. Actually, you can place any types of objects that you want if the prefabs just meet the required conditions. You can, with a little workaround, also use that to do a if you had, say, not an RTS game but a hack and slash game instead, where you had your little hero running around, you could use the same system to cast spells on the map, for instance, if that's what you want to do. So you're really not limited. Currently I'm working on a package that's pretty similar to this one, but that's designed specifically for casting spells. So if you're interested in that, just keep an eye out for it on the asset store. And yeah, as I said, if you have any further questions or feedback or requests for additional features, just hit me up, leave a comment, leave a review in the asset store, or just send me a message and I'll get to you as quickly as I can. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this tutorial, and thanks for watching. Bye bye.